$795.84. That's what a separated shoulder can pay a veteran every single month at the top of its range in 2026. Now here's the part nobody warns you about. The exact same injury pays $180 a month if it gets rated the wrong way. Same shoulder, same tier. A $600 swing that comes down to which code a rater reaches for. It's called an AC separation, and by the end of this you'll know the one rating path that pays more than double what most veterans settle for. There's a code the VA opens by default that quietly caps you, and a second one sitting right beside it that pays a lot more. Which one you land on is worth thousands of dollars a year.
Hey everyone, Michael here. Let me put the injury in plain terms before we touch a single number. Your AC joint is where your collarbone meets the tip of your shoulder blade. Fall on it hard, land wrong on a jump, take it in a wreck, and the ligaments holding those two bones together stretch or tear clean through. That's a separation. And here's the strange bureaucratic truth we're circling back to all episode. You hurt your shoulder, but the VA's first instinct is to pay you for your collarbone.
This is Nora, and that's exactly the trap. The default code tops out low. The code most veterans never ask for pays a lot more, but only if your paperwork is built for it. So the real question isn't what happened to your shoulder. It's which drawer the rater files it in.
I'm May. Look at the joint itself for a second. 2 bones, 1 small gap, a handful of ligaments. That's the whole injury and the whole fight.
The clavicle running across the top, the acromion on the shoulder blade, and that little joint where they meet. When it separates, the VA has to decide which of its drawers to file it in, and I mean that almost literally. I'm restoring an old card catalog cabinet at home, and this is that exact logic. Every impairment gets its own labeled drawer, its own code, and the drawer they pick sets your check.
Right. And most raters open the obvious drawer, write down 10%, and close the case. We're going to open the one right next to it.
Before Erica sets up where we're headed, there's a question that lands under every shoulder video, and I want to answer it straight. People keep asking, I separated my shoulder in service, so why did the VA only rate me at 10%? The honest answer is the whole reason we're here. 10% is usually the default code doing exactly what it's built to do. It is not the ceiling on what your shoulder is actually worth.
So here's the plan. The 2 codes and which one pays more. Why your dominant arm changes the check. A straight debate on whether to settle or fight for the bigger rating. What a rating expert watches on your C&P exam. And the part nobody warns you about, how to lock in your back pay. One more thing before we start. Everything we cover, plus a free shoulder rating breakdown and the exact forms, is waiting for you at va.professorerica.com. Let's open that second drawer.
So let's open both drawers side by side. The first code is 5203, clavicle or scapula impairment of. It's the one the VA reaches for first with an AC separation, because on paper this is a collarbone and shoulder blade injury. Malunion pays 10%. Non-union without loose movement, still 10. Non-union with actual loose movement, 20. A full dislocation, 20. And unless a rater finds that loose movement, you are parked at 10.
Which is the absurd part, and I'm not exaggerating it. That collarbone code caps at 10 or 20. You separate your shoulder, and 5203 pays you for your collarbone.
Now the other drawer. Watch what happens here.
The second code is 5201, arm, limitation of motion of. This one doesn't care about your collarbone at all. It rates how far you can actually lift your arm. Limited at shoulder level is 20%. Limited to midway up is 30% on your dominant arm. Limited to 25 degrees from your side, meaning you can barely raise it, is 40%. That's the code that pays what a wrecked shoulder is really worth.
Which motion though? It's flexion or abduction, whichever's worse. One number, not both added together.
Good catch that trips people up. You take the single worst direction, not a sum, but the point holds. The motion drawer runs from 20 all the way to 40, while the collarbone drawer usually dies at 10.
And there's a floor underneath all of it that a lot of veterans miss. Under Section 4.59, an actually painful joint is entitled to at least the minimum compensable rating, which is 10%. So even if your motion measures near normal, real pain on use should never leave you at 0.
So put the two next to each other and the gap is obvious. Same shoulder, two drawers. One tops out at 10, the other reaches 40.
So here's the question every veteran actually needs answered. Should I be rated under 5203 for the collarbone or 5201 for limited motion?
You're rated under whichever one pays you more, and the VA is required to pick the higher evaluation the evidence supports. If your motion is genuinely limited, 5201 usually wins. If it isn't, painful motion still floors you at 10. What you do not do is accept the collarbone drawer just because a ratter opened it first. Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it.
Here's a wrinkle almost nobody sees coming. The VA pays more for your dominant arm than your other one. It calls the dominant side the major arm and the other side the minor arm, and under 5201, the same limited motion is worth 10 more points on your dominant side.
Let me make that a real person instead of a rule. Picture Travis, a 34-year-old former Army paratrooper who's right-hand dominant and blew out his right shoulder on a bad landing. Right side, dominant side, so the VA calls it the major arm. Now I keep a 1970s motorcycle in pieces in my garage, and before I take anything apart I photograph it by subsystem, every part logged on its own. The VA rates a shoulder the same way, dominant arm on its own scale, and that scale simply pays more.
Same tier on your off arm pays less. The VA assumes you lean on your strong side.
So Travis can only raise his right arm to about 25 degrees from his side before it stops. On his dominant arm, that's 40% under 5201. Now watch what the wrong drawer would have cost him, line by line.
40% on a dominant arm pays $795.84 a month. Over a year, that's about $9,550. The 10% default pays roughly $2,165. Subtract them, and Travis was about to walk away from $7,385 a year.
Wait, run that again. Same shoulder, same veteran.
Same shoulder, same guy. The only thing that changed was which code the rater wrote down. And it somehow gets more ridiculous, because the arthritis that sets into that joint years later is a whole third code, 5003, one joint. 5203 for the collarbone, 5201 for the motion, 5003 for the arthritis. Your shoulder has more codes than it has bones.
Okay, that one's going on the board. But it's a real point, not just a joke. If that arthritis is separate and distinct from the motion loss, it can be rated on its own instead of swallowed into the same number.
That gap, $7,385 a year, is the entire reason we made this episode. Burn it into your memory before the debate, because in a moment we're going to argue about whether it's always worth chasing.
$7,385 every year from one word on a form.
Here's where it gets real, because the bigger rating is not automatically the right move for everyone. The honest fork is this. When the VA offers you 10% under 5203, do you take it and get paid now, or do you fight for the motion rating that could be worth thousands more? Michael thinks getting paid beats waiting. Nora thinks leaving that money is a mistake. I'll keep them honest from the middle.
Take the 10, it's certain, it's fast, and it's money in your account this month. A 5201 fight can mean a lowball exam, a denial, and a year of appeals for a rating you might not even get if your motion measures fine on the day. Certain money now beats maybe money later.
Slow down. You just told a veteran to walk away from $7,000 a year because the process is annoying. That's not caution, that's surrender. If the motion loss is real and documented, the VA is required to grant the higher evaluation. You don't leave that on the table to save yourself a phone call.
Required only if the evidence is there, Nora. That's the whole catch.
Which is exactly why you sequence it right the first time. Get the range of motion measured properly, get the pain and the flare-ups documented, then file. The higher rating isn't a gamble when the evidence is built before you walk into the exam.
Hold on, Michael. Is your real objection the money or the risk?
The risk, honestly, because I've watched veterans refuse a sure 10% swing for 40 and land at 0 on a bad exam day. If your arm actually still lifts, 5201 is not there for you, and painful motion caps you at 10 anyway.
That I'll grant you. If your motion is genuinely near normal, there's no 40% to chase, and pretending otherwise is how a claim gets denied for real. The fight is only worth it when the limitation is real.
So we actually agree on the rule. If your arm barely lifts, fight for the motion rating, the evidence carries it. If it lifts fine and just aches, take the 10 and stop.
So here's my verdict, and the law backs it in writing. The VA must assign the highest evaluation the evidence supports, so this is never about settling for less than you earned. If your motion is truly limited, document it and fight for 5201 because $7,000 a year is worth an exam and a wait. If your shoulder moves fine and only hurts, Section 4.59 still floors you at 10, so take it and file for an increase if it worsens later. The path is decided by your actual arm, not by which drawer a rater opened.
And I'll concede the money point because it's real. I just never want a veteran chasing 40 on a shoulder that lifts fine. Match the fight to the arm.
Everything we've said comes down to one appointment. The CNP exam, where someone measures your shoulder and writes the number that becomes your rating. There's a mistake veterans make in that room that quietly caps them, so we called in someone who knows how these claims get rated cold.
And the question this came from was pure timing, of course. A viewer wrote in and asked, "My arm moved fine at the exam, but it kills me by evening, so why did I only get 10%?
Let's bring her in. Calling now.
That evening pain is the entire problem. It's the most common way a good shoulder claim gets underrated because the exam catches your rested morning, not your real day.
Okay, slow me down and explain it like I've never seen the exam, because I want the veteran who's never done one to follow every step.
Fair. They put a proctor-like tool on your arm and ask you to lift it. The biggest mistake is pushing through the pain to look tough. The number they write is where the motion starts hurting, not where it finally stops. So say when it starts to hurt out loud.
So the honesty helps you here, not hurts you.
Exactly, and ask on the record whether they tested flare-ups and repeated use. That's the DeLuca rule, section 4.40. Your worst day counts, not just the calm one. On a shoulder that's really limited, that can be the jump from 10 to 30 or 40.
So give us the button to press. What does a veteran literally do differently in that room?
3 things. Say the exact moment pain begins. Ask them on the record to test flare-ups and repetitive use. And describe your worst day, not your best one, because you don't live on your best day. Do those 3 and the number on that form finally matches your shoulder. Thanks for having me. This is the one that costs people the most.
That's exactly the piece a brochure never hands you. Thank you for jumping on with us.
Let's turn all of this into something you can actually start this week. 3 things have to line up for the money to flow: service connection, a nexus, and an effective date. Miss any one and the rating never lands.
Service connection just means proving the injury ties to your service, and the bridge that carries it is the nexus. That's a doctor's line saying, in plain terms, this AC separation is at least as likely as not related to that jump, that fall, that wreck in service. No bridge, no claim, no matter how bad the shoulder is. Get that sentence in writing from a physician who examined you.
And the effective date is where the timeline decides your money, so run this in order. Let me put the whole path on one checklist. Step 1 and 2 are the diagnosis and the nexus we just covered. Step 3 is the one that quietly protects your wallet. File an intent to file before anything else, because your back pay reaches back to that date, not the date your claim finally finishes. Lock the date first, gather evidence second.
Step 4 is the exam Renata just walked us through. Report where the pain starts and ask them to test flare-ups on the record. And Step 5 is the whole reason we're here. Before you accept any decision, check the code. If your motion is limited and they rated you under 5203, that's the collarbone drawer, and you may be owed the motion rating instead.
The whole video in one line. One joint, several codes, and the winning one is usually the one they didn't open for you.
So if today gave you one move, make it this. When your rating letter comes, read the code it lists. If your shoulder's motion is limited and that letter says 5203, you have a real case for the motion rating that pays far more, and Section 4.59 guarantees you never sit at 0 for a painful joint. Match the fight to your arm, lock your date early, and don't let one word on a form cost you thousands a year. Here's the whole thing, boiled down. An AC separation can be rated for your collarbone at 10% or for your limited arm motion at up to 40%, and the VA owes you the higher one when your evidence supports it.
So do this tonight. Dig out your rating letter and read the diagnostic code. If it says 5203 and your arm doesn't lift right, that one check could put thousands a year back in your pocket. Future you will be glad you looked.
And the exam trick that stuck with me: say when it starts to hurt, out loud, and describe your worst day. Honesty pays here.
Mine's the timing. File that intent to file first because your back pay dates to the day you start, not the day it finishes.
If this saved you real money, hit subscribe, because next time we break down another common injury the VA quietly underrates and the code that pays you what it's actually worth. A like tells the algorithm to show it to the next veteran who needs it.
Before you go, one for the comments. What diagnostic code is on your shoulder rating right now? And did anyone ever explain to you which one it should be?
That is a wrap on today's lesson. Professor Erica here, thank you for spending your time with me.